Hello, everybody. Welcome to Open Resources for Nursing, the OpenRN project. I'm Vince Musell, the OpenRN lead librarian, and with me today is Kim Ernstmeyer, the project director for the OpenRN project.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
We're from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Chippewa Valley Technical College to be exact, and we're excited to share with you today some of our progress on the project. The learning objectives for today's short presentation is describe the nursing open educational resources being created by the OpenRN project, outline where to find the OpenRN open educational resources, and explain timelines for the release of future OpenRN project open educational resources. The takeaway today is we will be able to view the nursing pharmacology textbook and an associated H5P branching scenario. Before we get too far into the show here, I thought that we would take just a couple of minutes to kind of go over the background of the project. So in 2018, CVTC, or Chippewa Valley Technical College, applied for a grant with some partner institutions in Wisconsin, the Open Textbooks Pilot Grant, and it was awarded to us in 2019. The grant award amount was $2.5 million. And in that grant, we were charged with developing 5 open textbooks, and you can see the textbooks over here. The textbooks are in the nursing genre in their pharmacology, fundamentals, skills, mental health, and management. Along with the 5 textbooks, we were also charged with creating 25 virtual reality scenarios. Also, we projected that the project would eventually save students in Wisconsin, only in Wisconsin at least, $1.5 million. We're projecting that it impacts all 16 of Wisconsin's technical colleges, and over 15,700 students would be a part of this. Also of interest is the number of people involved in the project, and we have over 200 reviewers right now, peer reviewers nationwide, that are helping to kind of create and produce these books. All right, with that, I'm going to pass this along to Kim Ernstmeyer, who's going to be talking more about the details of the project.
Thanks, Vince. And as people hear more about our project, we always get the question of how are you doing this? And especially with the 2020 grant applications for the next round of funding. So we've used the next few slides to kind of organize our presentation based on the priorities of the grant application process and how we have managed the project based on those priorities. So the very first priority is collaboration, and collaboration truly is key. As Vince mentioned when he went through the previous slide, over 16 technical colleges are involved in the Wisconsin Technical College system. And of those 16, CVTC is leading this project with 3 other lead colleges. So we already had the structure in place for a consortium. And then we also have a statewide nursing curriculum. So we already had the curriculum in place. So once the books were selected, we could easily create chapters based on the competencies and performance criteria that were already established in that curriculum. So we already had our books pretty much lined up, laid out and ready to go. Along with that statewide curriculum and consortium, there was already some infrastructure set up. So the nursing deans meet semi-annually from all 16 colleges. There's a statewide nursing curriculum committee. We've had other consortium grant projects where we meet regularly. So we already had that infrastructure set up also. To help facilitate faculty collaboration within the project, we established 3 different roles. One role is the developer role, who's actually creating the OER. Another role is the contributor role, where they participate in the work groups that are creating the textbooks. And then the third role is the reviewer role. All 3 of those roles are paid with stipends directly paid from the grant to the faculty on a monthly basis. So that helps to get more volunteers for the project as well. And the way that we collaborate is we use Google Docs. By using Google Docs, any faculty can create. We have other faculty that are contributing, place comments within the documents, and it helps with our workflow, which I'll describe here as we go on to the next slide. So another priority of these grant projects are how are you addressing gaps? So Vince was involved in the grant writing process, the application process, where these textbooks were selected based on high enrollment nursing courses. And we discovered that these 5 books cost approximately half of the total book cost for the nursing program, and it was over $700. That's where the money will add up over time. The other gap that we identified was faculty awareness of what OER is and how to create it. So I'm going to let Vince talk for a minute about the OER 101 course that he developed as part of the grant.
Yes, so as Kim mentioned, part of the grant was to educate faculty on OER. So when we think about educating faculty or training faculty, we often think about talking about cost reduction that students might see, but really there's so many other impacts of OER that many of us know about, and that's student success in general. So thinking equity, persistence, retention, graduation, etc. So the course that we developed is 10 to 15 hours. It's in the LMS Canvas, and it's an open course. And the course really looks at OER through the lens of who, what, where, when, why, and how. So really at a very basic overview for faculty that might not know a lot about it. And in that course, a lot of myths are kind of dispelled, like online versus open educational resources, resources that might not be open but affordable, and basically the best way to kind of get started with this for your class and why this is so important. So the course is really just kind of something to level the field for faculty that might not know much about it. And we've seen great interest from not only Wisconsin, but also all over the country. We've had participants ranging from librarians to faculty to instructional designers and deans. I think we've even had a provost participate. So lots of different interests from all over. And it's been really great working with these people that are excited to move this forward.
And as Vince said, it's been a great resource for faculty. Just as we get them started, if they're interested in being a developer, we ask that they take this course first, just so that they're completely aware of what OER is and how to find resources. And it's been a great help in getting faculty involved. Another gap that we're addressing is related to industry. So we have an advisory committee for this grant project that's composed of industry members from across the state. We have nursing deans, we have nursing administrators from various hospitals, we have actively working nurses, and we even have some nursing students. And the industry members help identify current trends that are happening in healthcare, and if there are any gaps of nursing students as they graduate, what are things that they still need additional practice in doing? And so one of the gaps that was identified immediately during one of our first meetings was the skill of de-escalating patients or family members that are becoming agitated when healthcare is being provided. It's really a high stakes scenario that students don't get much practice in. So by creating virtual reality experiences or H5P experiences, we can provide that practice to students so that when they do encounter that in real practice, they know how to react initially. Then the final gap that we've talked about is quality. And so we've used peer review with rubrics, and not only statewide, but several nationwide faculty have expressed interest, and they participated in reviewing the nursing pharmacology book using a rubric. They also had the option of using a software package called Hypothesis that's free and open to the public, where faculty can go in and make comments, at the sentence level, so they can address content that maybe still seemed unclear or where they thought additional content needed to be added. And that feedback was very helpful as we piloted the first textbook and created our first edition. So now let's go to the next slide and talk about success, because truly what we're trying to do with our project is promote student success. So as I explained earlier, our textbooks are completely lined with the nursing curriculum. They're leveled for this level of student. We disseminate the OER in several ways. So they have the ebook that's available through Pressbooks, which we'll demonstrate shortly. And that has several downloadable versions that they can download and view offline, which, as we have all learned during COVID, that's an important capability for students that don't have good internet access. We also discovered during our research that over 60% of students prefer a print version. So we reached out to Xanadu, and they are the publisher for OpenStax textbooks. And we've developed a collaborative agreement with them. So they are able to provide an affordable print version for about $40 that students can purchase in college bookstores or on Amazon. And that cost is actually less expensive than what it would cost a student to just take the ebook to duplicating and have it printed. So it's a win-win. They get a nice soft cover textbook that they can use anywhere, anytime. And we've also just developed a sustainability plan based on that use of print versions. So Xanadu is able to apply a royalty fee, just a small fee, to the print versions. And then every semester, after we have total sales amounts calculated, they're able to take that fee, the aggregated amounts, and put it into our sustainability fund at CVTC. And that's a specific earmarked fund for after grant funding ends that will allow faculty to continue to update these textbooks and push out additional editions, just like a commercially published textbook. So those are the different types of downloadable versions. We also uploaded the textbook to LibreText, and LibreText is one of the other grant awardee winners from the U.S. Department of Education. And they have a wonderful remixing tool that allows any faculty anywhere to go in, take our book or take any book that's OER and pull out pieces that they want to use and create their own textbook that's aligned with their curriculum. So we really anticipate that the content in our books will be able to be remixed into several other programs' textbooks as well. This semester is the first semester that the nursing pharmacology book is currently being used as a primary resource in course sections across the state of Wisconsin. There's also some other states that are using the textbook. And what we'll do statewide is collect student outcome data, looking at course retention and success rates in sections that are using the OER textbook and compare them to sections that are not using the OER textbook and just see where the data lies. And we're really hopeful that the student success, will definitely be improved in the OER sections. We also include a student survey and faculty survey within the textbook and our H5P scenarios, because we're always looking for feedback that will just continue to enhance student success and what they need for their type of learning to be successful. So to do that, let's go to our next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about the personalized learning and technology that we've incorporated. So we use a software platform called H5P, and we use that to create various learning activities that provide formative assessment feedback to the students. So there's some things as simple as flashcards using glossary terms within the textbook. There's multiple choice quiz type questions that provide the immediate answers and rationale for why the correct answer is correct and why the incorrect answer is incorrect. And we're also creating something called branching scenarios. Now, other schools have used these branching scenarios as a type of virtual simulation, and we found this to be very helpful during the COVID closures, as faculty are trying to find more online learning activities that they can do remotely with students when there's closures, for clinical experiences or other classes. So what we'll be showing later is one of our H5P scenarios that we developed using media that we created during a previous grant project that was open source. And what we'll be doing in the next few years is creating additional media using virtual reality environments. So we'll be able to take screen recordings of virtual reality and plug those into these branching scenarios where students feel like they're part of a scenario, they're immersed, they're engaged in interacting, the typical interaction with the patient and having to make decisions and create their clinical judgment that way. So that's how we've done it so far. Let's talk about the lessons we've learned to this point. We're 18 months approximately, a little bit more than that now, into the grant project. So this is what we've learned so far. First thing is that milestones were very helpful. So as part of the grant application project, the writing team created milestones every 6 months throughout the project in terms of when the deliverables would be ready. So that helped us quickly lay out when the books would be published and ready for use. The other thing we've discovered is key personnel truly are key. This takes a village to create these textbooks. So the core team members that we have at CVTC include the project director, myself, who is a subject matter expert in nursing and nursing education. And I think that piece is important as the process is guided towards what promotes student success. We have 2 librarians, Vince and another librarian that helps curate OER, curate OER images, create attributions, ensure that the images that faculty have selected when developing the chapters are truly open source, and just provide OER advice. So that's been invaluable to someone that did not have any OER experience starting out the project. Our instructional designer is also a subject matter expert. She's a nurse and a nurse educator. So she knows what concepts students tend to struggle with and what type of strategies work to help them understand those concepts. So that's been very helpful. We have an instructional technologist to assist with the various software platforms like H5P, Hypothesis, etc. So that's been invaluable. We learned as we went, we don't have experience writing textbooks, and none of the faculty had experience writing textbooks. So we were able to find a copy editor that had already worked with commercially published textbooks. And she truly helped with this first textbook in putting it into a format similar to a commercial textbook. For example, calling out images was one, making sure that there is consistency across chapters in use of vocabulary, things like that. And then finally, we also have a grant accounting specialist that had experience with federal grants, and she's also been very helpful in making sure that we're following the appropriate standards according to federal grants. So the third lesson we learned was about workflow, and this continues to evolve. Vince can attest to this too. So when we first started, we just defining how to write OER was something that took quite a bit of time, especially in the nursing field, because it's so important to have evidence-based practice. So we discovered that the workflow started with the librarians curating existing OER, and then the faculty who are subject matter experts could then look for what additional content we needed. And then they would go out and look in the public domain or in peer review nursing journals to look for additional information to include in our chapters. And then Vince helps to make sure that the citations and the attributions are correctly cited using footnotes. So that's been very helpful. We've discovered along the way that faculty consistently go through this process. You can see on the slide here, this is called the guided inquiry process, and it was shared with our team by one of the librarians, just in terms of what students and faculty may go through as they're doing research. But we found this model really applies to the creation of OER. So if you start at the bottom with the actions, so we're just kind of seeking relevant information and exploring what OER is. At that point, their thoughts tend to be kind of vague. They're not really sure. You know, if they've taken the OER 101 course, they're maybe a little more clear, but there's still a lot of muddiness to it. And the feelings usually start out with definitely a feeling of uncertainty. How do we create this? How do we structure it? As they learn more about OER and the success that can be promoted in students, faculty get more optimistic. But then when the time actually comes to write a textbook chapter, everyone goes through this feeling of feeling confused, doubtful, frustrated, A real feeling of imposter syndrome, like who am I to write a textbook? And we encourage our faculty, we're not saying that you're experts in this specific topic, but you are an expert in teaching students at this level how to learn this content and what content they need to know to be successful nurses. And so as we encourage faculty, we will say, you know, write it like you teach it. Just sit down with a blank piece of paper and write it as if you're standing in front of your class and teaching it. And once they start doing that, they start to develop a more sense of clarity and a sense of direction. And as where they share it with the group for comments, they develop more confidence. And then pretty soon they're ready to write another chapter. So there's definitely a process that they go through. At the very end, they feel very satisfied with what they've produced. So part of leading a project would be acknowledging those feelings that faculty experience and encouraging them through that process. One resource that we found very helpful in this process was Rebus's Guide to Publishing, and the hyperlink is here in the slide if you want to go through it. But it does talk about scoping out the project, developing a workflow, how to write the content, reviewing it, and then releasing it. So I highly recommend that resource for anyone interested in creating OER. We've mentioned before the importance of that OER 101 course, but at least in our state, faculty were not that aware of OER, and that's based on a survey that the Wisconsin state system actually did, finding that administrators and librarians tend to be very aware of OER, but faculty not so much. They probably heard of it, but they don't necessarily know what it is. And students had a very low level of knowledge about OER. So part of our project is just continually promoting awareness of what it is and how it impacts students. We talked a little bit about the peer review, and I can't emphasize enough how much that helped with the quality of our first textbook, because especially with the nationwide reviewers that had some experience in textbook writing, their advice was invaluable as we created our first textbook. And then lastly, sustainability. That's always a question we get about the grant. So we were thrilled to come up with a solution with Xanadu to create that sustainability fund so that these textbooks will continue to live and evolve after the grant funding ends. So I'm going to let Vince talk a little bit more about the milestones of our upcoming deliverables.
Thanks, Kim. I just wanted to take a couple minutes here to go over our milestones, because when I talk with people, a lot like to hear about the story from the beginning to the end, and it's hard to kind of visualize that. So again, we applied for the grant in the fall of 2018, but we were really awarded it in the spring of 2019. And when we were awarded the grant, we were kind of like deer in headlights, or we were froze up. We're like, oh, what do we do? How do we do this now? It's all good on paper. Now, how do we make this a reality? So it took us a couple months to kind of work through some things and identify some really good core team members. But really, that took us 2 months, and we were able to do so. By January of 2020, we had our first OER 101 course piloted. Again, that trains faculty and administrators from over the state, and it's ended up helping to train people from the country, all over the country as well. We've had over 100 graduates of the program so far. In June 2020, this past June, our first text, Nursing Pharmacology, was published. We'll show you that in just a moment here. And then next June is going to be our second text, which is Nursing Skills, followed by the third text in August of 2021, which is the Nursing Fundamentals book. And then if you look to 2022, again, June and August, we'll see our fourth and fifth texts, Mental Health and Management. And then beginning January 2021 is when we start releasing some of these virtual reality scenarios. And then we anticipate that March 2023, our grant is completed with all of these deliverables in mind, of course. All right, so we thought we'd take you on a little tour of the resources. Here's some instructions here in case you're watching this asynchronously. But I'm going to go right to the demonstration here. And Kim is actually going to guide me through in some of this, but we're going to start with the website.
So the best place to get information about our project and see things as they're released is to go to this, to the web page. So if you scroll down, there's just some basic information about the who, what, when, where, and why. But the most important link I want to show you is the View Online hyperlink for nursing pharmacology. By clicking on that, you'll be able to see the ebook. And so I'm going to have Vince click on Read Book. This is the live book. If you look in the left corner, you'll see contents. By clicking on contents, you can go directly to a chapter. So let's go to the antimicrobial chapter and expand it. And now you can see the subsections within antimicrobials. And we actually modeled this after the OpenStax textbooks because we found it very helpful for students if they want to quickly look at information, related to one specific type of drug, they can click on it here. Perhaps just click on basics, Vince, and we can look at the content of the textbook. So once you're in here, you can scroll down and read information. You can see where there's images included and glossary terms that are highlighted. You'll see at the bottom, if you keep going, where our information is footnoted. And you can see some highlights in there, and what those are actually left from when we were using Hypothesis to get feedback. So that's just in Vince and my version there, but you can see the footnotes at the bottom, which will help make updating this textbook even more helpful in the future. The other thing, if you go just up a little bit, Vince, is they can see the simple flashcards. So these are based on the glossary terms that faculty have identified that they would assess a student on. And so you can, in this one, you can actually type in, and if you don't type it exactly, then I tried pathogen, or there we go. It gives them their answers immediately, the feedback immediately. You can check your answer and go that way too if you're incorrect. So that's a good demonstration of what they see when they're incorrect. You also see down at the bottom where it says next, how they can navigate page by page. I'm going to go down to the very, very right so they can go to the next. There we go. So they can, this is how they would read if they were paging through a book. That's how that simulates doing that. I do want to show you for a minute. We had some interest expressed on the H5P activity. So one H5P branching scenario is located, if you go down in this chapter down to learning, module learning activities. And the first thing that pops up is like a quiz activity. So again, they can select the answer and get immediate feedback by checking their answer. And the next activity, go ahead and show. So that's the incorrect. And then if they select the correct, then they would get a green. The next activity is the branching scenario. And so this is what we used H5P and the previous media that we had. By clicking on start the course, and then see in the top, you can either click on proceed, or some of them have arrows down at the bottom. So that's one thing you do have to pay attention to within H5P. But you can see where the patient is introduced to them. This is Patrick Armstrong. He's 16 years old. The next slide has a question. So part of the content is discussing this peak flow meter. So if they click on the very first answer there, they get correct and they get an image of what that is, and then they can go ahead and proceed. And here is a video of the patient actually speaking. Maybe we can play that just for a few seconds because these videos truly engage the student into this scenario. It's kind of quiet to hear, but if you play that, you can hear, the student can watch him. They can see that he's short of breath. He's speaking in short phrases. He's explaining what happened to them. So this is really like interviewing a true patient, and it really pulls the student into the scenario. By clicking on proceed now, there'll be some different decision points that they have to do in terms of vital signs and other things like that. So we designed these initial scenarios based on media that we already had and decision points where we wanted students to apply the material and develop clinical judgment. So that's an example of our first textbook. The next 4 textbooks will be organized in a similar manner with each chapter on the side and then learning activities in a separate area. The other thing I wanted to point out on the website is you scroll down, you can see it's kind of hidden there, but that little yellow tab says check out our blog. And as we've released performance reports, we were awarded this OER award for excellence. We post those things. So as virtual reality scenarios are released, we'll post those here as well. So that's a great place to kind of stay on top of what is currently being released. The other thing I want to point out, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, if you're interested in more information about our grant, whether you want to receive performance reports or if you're interested in being a reviewer of a textbook, you can fill out this information. It adds your name to a list, and that's where we email our quarterly performance reports, or I'll reach out to you when the time comes for reviewing with more information. So that's our website. That's definitely the most important go-to piece. If you want to click on the book there in the middle, that's the same link. It's just a direct link to the textbook. So if you say you wanted to hyperlink this within your learning management system, you would just use that hyperlink there at the top to direct your students that direction. The other link is LibreText. We don't need to go there, but if you click on the LibreText hyperlink, that's where you could use a remixing tool and remix this content to align it with your curriculum. The Xanadu image has a link to the free downloadable PDF of the textbook if you're interested in downloading it. It is too large to email, and so we use it that way. And then we also track a number of downloads by colleges across the country and across really internationally that are currently looking at the textbook. And then the H5P, the hyperlink to that, if you want to click on that real quick, Vince, that shows a list of our H5P activities as they're being developed. So these will eventually all be included within our textbooks. But in the meantime, if you're interested in using any of these in your courses, again, you would just copy the hyperlink into your learning management system. And there are associated teaching plans if you're looking at the original simulation that was created that this is based on. So those are where we find the resources. Anything you want to add, Vince? I think we've come up to our end of our time.
Oh, I don't think I have anything to add. I'd just like to express that if you are interested in the grant, you can follow it by signing up for those regular reports. And I think it's been very helpful to many. The reports are sent out at least quarterly, so you'd always get an update at least a few times a year.
Exactly. Well, with that being said, we thank you for your interest in the grant. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can also email us directly through the website, and we'll be glad to answer any questions. So enjoy the rest of the conference, and let's continue to promote OER for student success together.
Thanks, everybody.